terms of their overall stress and the stimulus they place in the body. One of the most important and yet often most neglected is training to stimulate not fitness but recovery. Now, this is important because recovery, again, is a big driver of fitness itself because it helps shift the body into what's called the recovery state. Now, the recovery state is essentially just the internal environment that facilitates anabolic activity where tissues are rebuilt and remodeled to be bigger, stronger, faster, and all these sorts of things. So the recovery state requires circulating levels of amino acids, full glycogen stores, anabolic hormones, a high level of parasympathetic nervous system function, because again, the parasympathetic nervous system is what drives recovery in the first place, and adaptation, low stress hormones, good blood flow, all those sorts of things. So we need to achieve these by a combination of diet, learning how to relax and deal with life stress, and using a particular type of training, which I've talked briefly about, called high performance recovery training. So what is high performance recovery training? Well, first and foremost, like I said, it's a specific way of organizing training in order to help drive the body into that recovery state. This is going to help facilitate faster improvements in fitness because the body is going to be able to recover faster and thus adapt quicker and develop bigger, stronger, more fit tissues, and it's going to be able to do it because of this additional recovery that's stimulated. Now, generally speaking, a high performance recovery training session, or HPRT as I like to call it, is going to be about 30 to 40, maybe 45 minutes in length. Again, it's not going to be significantly longer than that because if we start doing too much work, then we can take away from recovery. So 30 to 40 or 45 minutes is about where most of these sessions are going to fall. They're going to include a variety of things from breathing drills, corrective mobility exercises, low to moderate conditioning, and some actual soft tissue work towards the end. So the key here is we're just trying to avoid high levels of heart rate that are maximum. We're trying to avoid strength loads that are above 90%. We're trying to limit or minimize some eccentric loading. And again, the goal here is to stimulate recovery. If we follow these basic principles, then that's exactly what's going to happen. So there's not an exact way you have to do things, so I'm going to walk you through a typical training session of how I put together high performance recovery training sessions, and it's something I've found to be incredibly beneficial in my training and literally the training of everybody I work with, as well as other people I've introduced the concept to. So generally speaking, each training session is going to have 5 distinct components that are going to flow into one another. There's going to be a breathing section where we focus on respiration. We're going to mobilize and get the body mobile. We're going to do a movement or a moderate to low intensity conditioning session. We're going to stimulate the nervous system, and then we're going to go through a cool down process. So again, each of these components serves a specific purpose and is there for a reason because it all works together to push the body into that recovery state. So let's walk through each one of those at a time. All right, first up is breathe. Now, in the section on respiration, movement, recovery with Mike and Bill, you learned how to do these different breathing resets based on the results of the infrasternal angle test, whether someone's wide or narrow. And this is a great place to start a high performance recovery training session with one of these resets in order to help the person develop more effective breathing patterns and kind of reset the autonomic system before the training session begins. That's why they're called breathing resets, again, which Mike and Bill talked about. Now, generally speaking, you're just doing 2 to 3 sets of 5 reps. This shouldn't take more than a minute or two, and it's just going to get the ball rolling and help develop, again, those effective breathing patterns which we want to carry on throughout the training session. Once that has been completed, you're going to want to move into the mobilize phase, and again, you're introduced to these breathing type mobility drills. Now, there's an endless range of mobility drills. The ones that Mike and Bill cover certainly aren't the only ones you have to perform or can perform, but the idea here is just to simply get the body warmed up and get it moving, and this typically means something like 4 to 6 mobility drills and working on, again, effective breathing patterns throughout. So again, our goal here is not to do a marathon workout, but to keep things moving. So this whole process should take, again, 5 to 6, maybe 7 minutes to go through a series of exercises. And once you're familiar with them, it's quick, it's easy, you run through them. And again, by the end of this, the body should be looser, it should be more mobile. Once you're done with that, now we move into the move section. And just like it sounds, the goal here is to move the body. Now, the key here is what we're looking for is moderate heart rate conditioning, which drives increased blood flow. It drives amino acids and other nutrients into the working tissues. So we're looking for somewhere between about 15 and 25 minutes in this move portion of the workout. Now, if you're using Morpheus like we looked at in the method section, again, the goal here is to keep your body in the recovery zone. That's part of the purpose of Morpheus, is to give you that recovery zone. Now, if you're not using Morpheus, you're simply going to target more of a 130 to 150 type range, and you're typically going to use either cardiac output or the tempo or recovery zone type intervals, because both of those are going to be a low to moderate enough intensity that they're going to stimulate recovery by driving blood flow and developing some moderate metabolic fitness along the way. Now, another really important component here is you want to use a variety of exercises, because we're trying to drive blood flow and we're trying to stimulate the entire body to get into that recovery state. So sleds and prowlers, VersaClimber, high intensity continuous training the bike, medicine balls, all those sorts of things can be used. The goal here is to limit the eccentric component. And if you noticed, the sled, the prowler, the VersaClimber, the HICT, all these sorts of things, med balls, they can be performed in a way where there's limited eccentric stress. And the reason for that is that the eccentric component tends to cause the most muscle damage and soreness. If we can limit that, or at least minimize it to some extent, we're typically going to see a faster recovery, because we did just as much work while limiting the stress from the eccentric component. So again, it doesn't mean you have to do everything with concentric only, but typically you want to try to pick these sorts of exercises or methods where there's less eccentric stress. So if you're doing a deadlift, you're going to drop it at the bottom. The top, I should say. The VersaClimber, all these things, they don't have an eccentric load, so they're great to use. Now, the other thing is you don't have to go super light here, okay? This isn't just body weight exercises. You can want to use loaded and unloaded movements, because you want to target the full range of muscle fibers. If all you do is a body weight exercise or mobility drill, you're not driving recovery, driving nutrients and blood flow, which stimulate recovery into the higher threshold muscle fibers. So again, part of this move section should be performing a variety of exercises. And the other thing is, you really don't have to perform the same exercises all the time. It can be a bit random, if you want to call it that. You don't have to have an exact schedule of these different exercises. You can do recovery-driven circuits here. The exercises themselves aren't as important, because you're not going for a specific effect in terms of movement skills. You're just trying to get the body moving in a variety of movement patterns. So the sky's the limit here. You can do any types of movements, any types of things you want to do. Again, it's beneficial to limit the eccentric component, but really it's kind of up to you how you want to do these exercises, and you certainly should vary them from one HPRT session to the next. Now, once you've completed that part of the workout, now we get into what I would call the stimulate section. And the stimulate section is basically where our goal here is to stimulate the central nervous system through recruitment of higher threshold motor units. That's just a fancy way of saying we want to activate the fast twitch fibers, and we want to get the central nervous system stimulated by causing it to recruit them. Now, the way that we do this is a fairly heavy lift, 85 to 90% of your 1RM typically, but we're only doing 2 to 4 sets and just 1 to 3 reps. So we're not doing a high volume, we're doing a low volume, but we are stimulating the body by causing it to fire as many muscle fibers as possible. Now, there's ways to do this. You can do, again, a drop deadlift, where you simply perform a deadlift and drop the weight to minimize the eccentric load. You can do box jumps and those sorts of things where there's less eccentric load. You can do Olympic lifts where you drop it from the top. Again, you don't have to do exercises with no eccentric load, but it is going to provide the most beneficial type of stimulation, again, because it's going to have the least impact in terms of eccentric stress on the body. And then again, that's going to help stimulate recovery without the additional stress that comes with doing a heavier load. So a deadlift where you drop the bar from the top, if you can do that, for example, is going to be better than doing a full range heavy squat to 90%. That's going to be a greater level of stress. And if you do those sorts of things, you just want to keep the sets and reps even a bit lower, and the weight lighter as well, again, because of that added eccentric stress. So once you've completed that, now your goal is to go into the cool down phase. Now, typically, you're going to spend 2 to 3 minutes. This is pretty much the same type of cool down you can do with most any workout, where you do 2 to 3 minutes of low intensity conditioning. This could be riding the bike, this could be walking and jogging, jump roping, calisthenics. You want to gradually decrease the heart rate to 100 or below, again, to stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system function. Once you do that, you want to do 2 to 3 minutes of a relaxation position, which is typically kind of on your back or in a cradled position, or some sort of relaxing position where you can control your breathing, slow it down, extend the eccentric or extend the exhalation to drive your heart rate as close to your resting heart rate as possible. Now, most of the time you're not going to get all the way down to your true resting heart rate, but because this wasn't a high intensity session to begin with, you should be able to drive your resting heart rate fairly low. You should be able to get it down at least within 5 or 10 beats of your true resting heart rate, again within this 5 to 10 minute cool down period. If you can't do that, then chances are you used either too much intensity or too much volume in the training session itself. Now, once you've done that, you've stimulated the parasympathetic nervous system. Now you want to use light foam rolling or a tool like the stick or some other stretching or soft tissue related method, again, to help facilitate that post-workout recovery and keep the process rolling. So a key point here is when you do this type of cool down, or when you do this type of soft tissue work, I should say, it shouldn't be painful. Okay, we're not trying to elicit a sympathetic pain response. We're trying to facilitate further parasympathetic activation, and that means, generally speaking, very light foam rolling, or if you're using the stick, very light pressures, stretching to the point where you're not in any sort of pain. You want to use these sorts of soft tissue methods that, again, don't make you hurt, but actually just help release some of the tension that's associated with performing some of the work. So that should be the most important guide. So once you've done that, you're basically finished with the HPRT session. Again, 30 to 45 minutes. And if you look at a sample training session here, you could go from quadruped breathing, band pull downs, arm bar, into some correctives or some mobility, ankle rolls. Then for the move section, you can go into some tempo intervals or recovery zone intervals, as we call them, some prowler push, HICT. And then for the stimulation, you could do a drop deadlift combined with a push-up, just a couple sets there, and then go down into a cool down. So again, there's endless ways to build these types of training sessions. I've included a download here to see 2 other sample sessions, but really it's up to you how you want to build them. As long as you follow the basic template, it's just going to give you a framework so that you can pick whatever exercises, whatever structure you want. But this simple 5-step process of breathe, mobilize, move, stimulate, and cool down gives you a very easy way to build these sorts of workouts. And again, the most important thing here is that after someone does them, they should feel better than before they did this type of workout. That's the defining factor. If you leave an HPRT session feeling mobile, feeling good, feeling energized, then you know that it helped to stimulate recovery and shifted the body into the recovery zone. If you're using Morpheus, you should see your recovery score go up by anywhere from about 3 to 5%. And again, that's a sign that you chose the right volumes, the right intensities. If you see the recovery score go down, then that means simply that your heart rates were too high, or your duration is too long, or some combination thereof. So as long as you follow these guidelines, give these a try, you're going to see a dramatic effect in terms of how the body stimulates recovery, because again, it shifts the body into that recovery state where everything is accelerated.